Welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I am Chip Shell, and today I welcome a guy who has frequently been described as being laid back, an easygoing dude. Despite not being a musician, he has had a huge impact on the Erie music scene as the owner of the Docksider from 1983 to 2006, right? All right, Bob Nelson, welcome to the podcast.
How do you do? Nice to see you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, this is fun.
Am I right in saying you are not a musician? Do you play anything?
No, I don't. I don't. I tried piano when I was in college, and I got an incomplete, so I decided maybe I should try something else.
All right. And that was at Teal College,
That was at Teal.
68, 72.
68 to 72, correct.
Are you an Erie guy? Where are you from originally?
I'm an Erie guy. I'm an Erie guy originally, born and raised. Got married right after college to a gal that was in the Army, so we moved around the States for a while.
Oh, okay.
Then I came back to Erie, and I've been here ever since.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
High school?
High school, yes. Strong Vincent High School.
Strong Vincent and Colonel. All right.
Class of 1968. And I was the colonel at the pep rallies.
Oh, really?
I my senior year, I was Colonel Strong Vincent at the pep rallies.
I was the Trojan at McDowell when I did it. See that?
See that?
I knew it. All right. So, in 83 is when you purchased the Docksider. But before that, when you come back, you're what? You're part owner of Oliver's and
Yes, yeah,
and
right. Well, we started Oliver's off from scratch. I mean, at first it was a place called the Lameda Tea Room.
This is on French Street?
This is on French Street,
Okay.
715 French.
Yeah.
It's just down from Wagner's side door, which was Skeeter, that just
Yeah.
got torn down now.
That's right.
But it was Wagner's side door that got me and Doug Nichols, one of the Nichols boys that I was involved with, Sumner being the other one.
Oh, sure.
Get in the bar business because we used to hang at Wagner's and they were packed.
Huh. So
And
what
we'd
did
sit
you
there and we drink and we think, geez, imagine what a couple of smart guys like us could do if we got into the bar business. Yuck, not
Sure.
knowing anything
Thousands
about
of-
anything at the time.
Yeah,
But-
thousands of people
yeah.
have said the same thing.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So we started that off, and boy, it started off slowly. I remember because I was working at the Green Shingle Truck Stop then.
I was going to say, what was your regular job?
I was managing the restaurant at the Green Shingle Truck Stop,
wow.
which by the way, was open 24/7, but the average ticket was a cheeseburger, fries, coffee, and a piece of pie, and sales in that place were over $1 million a year.
I bet.
I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, and being a local too, like you would go there to eat sometimes as locals. It wasn't just people coming in off
for sure.
of 90.
Their 4-egg omelet was
Absolutely.
known around the tri-state area as to go there. All
right, so
and
you're
you'd end up there at 4 a.m. and you'd be sure and get one of those.
That's right.
That's for sure, yeah.
So you're working there, and then you're hanging out at the swinging door or the
it was Wagner's side door
Wagner's
then.
side
Then it
door.
changed to Skeeter's. Then it was the Stadium
Sure.
Lounge and
Right.
all those other things. But it was Wagner's when we first, started it off. But when we when we hung there. But when we first started off Oliver's, it was slow. I mean, it was slow. I would work there on a Saturday because I didn't work at the Green Shingle on a Saturday.
Yeah.
So I'd 10 bar there on a Saturday. I'd open at 2, and it would get to be about 5 o'clock, and nobody would have been in yet. And I used to sit there and think, I wonder if it's possible to ever have a day when no one shows up.
yeah.
And luckily that never happened.
Okay, yeah.
Because people started to come in, and we started to hit our stride and started to book bands. I remember the Dogs played for us at Oliver's. If you remember the Dogs.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. I've had Jack on and
Oh, yeah.
Kevin on, and
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Yeah, and
so this is before the Docksider.
This is before the
Dogs were playing at
Docksider.
the original Oliver's
Right.
on French Street.
Right.
And, I mean, did you guys... were they the first band, or
Well, I was trying to think of what bands we had. The only other one I could remember was Matt Kramer. If you remember
Sure.
Matt Kramer, but
He's
he was in a rock and roll band then, and he was the drummer, and he was on a raised platform, and the band was in front of him, and he was like the main show.
Okay.
It was like a Gene Krupa kind of a thing. He's raised up, and the band is playing
Sure.
in front of him. But I can't really remember who the heck else that we had there.
Yeah, because I wondered if live music was part of who you are even from the beginning. It wasn't just Docksider. When you were at Oliver's, you were like, because you're a music fan.
Right.
So you were like, hey, if I'm going to have a bar, I got to have live music.
Hey, I'm a hippie from the 60s,
Right.
and there was new music like coming out every day.
Yeah.
Every day that you'd want to get yourself wrapped up around. It was such an amazing time.
So you're working at both jobs, really.
Right, yeah.
And what was the other place that you owned?
Well, then from Oliver's, we bought a place called Old Main Inn in Fredonia, New York.
Yeah.
But that was actually called Goby Dick's.
Oh.
Yeah, before we bought it, and it was like a loungy. It was probably the only bar in Fredonia that didn't have a crowd.
Yeah.
Because that place rocked. I mean, I remember the first couple of times Douglas and I went and we're driving home, and we look at each other and we say, we got to get a bar in this town, because that place, I mean, when the drinking age was 18, that was the most partying town I was ever in my life.
Yeah.
I was never in a town that partied more than that. So we had that one. And
better name than Goby Dick's. Oh, yeah. For sure.
yeah, really.
So eventually in 83, you discover old Pondy George's place.
Exactly.
The Wonder Bar, it was called.
The Wonder Bar. Tom Argeny owned it at the time.
Okay.
You know, when I bought it, Pondy had sold it to Tom.
All right.
And Tom then, in fact, sold it to me. But there were bullet holes in the walls in the back room from where they would shoot.
I was going to say, for those listeners who may be too young to remember, so we're talking about 420 State Street. It was right next to where McDonald's used to be, and McDonald's wasn't even there yet.
McDonald's wasn't even there when we opened.
Right. And so this was a different State Street than we're used to now. I mean, it was rough.
It was rough.
And the Wonder Bar, like, describe what was going on around the Wonder Bar and that whole area, because Sherlock's had just opened.
Well, Sherlock's had just opened, and we had gone up to Sherlock's, and that was like a bright spot for me. Scully's had opened.
Oh, right.
So Scully's was down the street, but there was a big void, and Scully's and Sherlock's didn't have a lot of crosstown traffic.
Yeah.
There was the that place that moved up to 20. The Saucery was actually on 5th Street between State and French.
Oh, really?
There by me. And there was the Celebrity Lounge.
Oh, yeah.
And
I know that name.
I remember with the guy that was a manager for us at Oliver's, we said, let's go slumming. And we said, well, where do you want to go? I go, well, we got to go, to the Celebrity. And what are we going to drink there? Well, Bankers Club Gin, of course. It doesn't get any more down and dirty than the Celebrity Bar and Bankers Club Gin. Yeah. So that's what we did. But yeah, it was a very tough area.
Yeah,
it wasn't anything like it was now. In fact, my father, we went down there to take some pictures for the Liquor Control Board.
Yeah.
Because they require pictures of the inside of the place for the transfer of the license. And I'm down there, and the clientele had heard he's selling, and he's selling to me, and they didn't like it. And they're all...
You're what, 32 or something?
I'm 32. Like that? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And they don't like it, and they're all getting in my face, and, you're not going to take over this place, and we're going to be staying here, and this and that. And my father, who's a World War II veteran, was with me at the time. And never said much, but, he was a prisoner of war, and, in the war, he was shot down pilot and all that sort of stuff. So he'd been through a lot. So he looks at me, and he never said much. And he says, as we left after that ordeal, he says, hey, Bob, are you sure you know what the F you're doing? And that was the first time I ever heard him drop the F-bomb, So I knew it was serious. And it was like, well, Sherlock's is just up the street. The place has changed. And Erie Art Museum is moving in.
Oh, okay.
Like across the street.
Right.
And there's going to be a McDonald's built right next door to me. So I think it's going to be okay. And it did turn out okay.
And so you left Oliver's and...
I left Oliver's.
Your partnership with those other guys, you just said, hey, I'm going out on my own. Right.
Yeah, it seems like I play best by myself when it comes to that sort of thing.
Okay.
And that was what I wanted to do, was just to do it... right or wrong, make it or fail, but just on my own.
Perfect. That's what I was going to say. So, why did you? Yeah. Oh, okay, so you're renting the place. You're not, but you didn't buy it.
Right.
And quickly, talk about how that clientele changed.
You want me to talk quickly? I'm not sure.
I don't want you to talk quickly, but you made some changes, slight changes in the place.
Oh yeah.
That clientele may have said.
Well, it was. We raised prices. Okay. I started handling imports. There weren't really many microbrews at the time, but I started imports. I started with more expensive beers, and a big thing that I did is, we did some work on the inside, but not a whole bunch of work.
So it looked the same. Bar was on the right-hand side.
Right, but it was a different bar top.
Oh, it was? Okay.
In fact, it was the same bar top that we moved up to 1015 State.
Gotcha.
But we had built that. We actually laid an oak floor and made that the bar top.
Oh, okay.
And we just, we just kind of opened it up. But I had shut down for like 4 to 6 weeks, and I just didn't open because I wanted to give the old clientele a new place to hang.
Gotcha.
Find a new spot, hang there. I opened undercover without word to anybody.
Okay.
I just opened the doors and we start serving. Some of them kind of filter in, but nobody knew exactly what was going on because it was a tough crowd. That whole area down there on Lower State was tough.
Sure, right.
And then once that time had passed, I spent a little money on Rocket 101, did some advertising, and the place took off right from there.
Now, obviously it's known as a live music bar.
Right.
Your sister started coming in too and bringing a new crowd
and
everything.
Yeah.
And that kind
and
of...
she worked there too.
Right. So we're talking in early 83s. One of the things I found, in one of the earliest ads for it, I love it. It says the new party place on State.
Oh my God. I was thinking about that too. Because Sherlock's always advertised, their place as the party place on State Street.
Okay.
So I took that and changed it a little bit and called it the new party place on State.
Very cool.
But boy, I'll tell you, I couldn't have asked for better neighbors with Bev and Tippy.
Yeah.
They were always just so nice to me. And every single thing and aspect, I'd go up, because especially at first, I'd run out of stuff. I'd go up and I'd say, man, you got a bottle of vodka I can borrow from you? Which, I shouldn't say that now.
Yeah,
that's probably all right. Because you're not really supposed to do that.
Right.
But then you make sure you buy the same thing and you return it to them. And that's what, you would do if you were friends with the bar next to you.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah.
And you needed something. But they were great. They were.
And the two bars really became different as far as the type of music. I mean, you brought in everything from reggae to world music to really blues, and they were more hard rock. And,
right, exactly.
But there was sort of a crossover eventually, and some of the original bands played there, and you had lots of those folks.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of times, Sherlock's was always crowded.
Yeah.
And I know you had Marlene on here not too long ago, and she was a bartender up at Sherlock's at the time. And when they would have a break, like maybe her and a couple of her friends that were bartending, they would always run down the street and hang at Docksider just to be able to get out of the scene up there.
That's what she said,
have a drink, have a shot or something, and then roll back to work. But it was a really nice, it was a nice kind of a thing. And especially my Tuesday night special was Trips.
Okay.
It was a triple shot mixed drink for $1.50.
Okay.
So you could get like a triple for $1.50 of bar stock vodka. And Sherlock's had quarter drafts that night.
Okay.
So it was a perfect compliment.
Back and forth.
There was more traffic on State Street, more foot traffic between Sherlock's and Docksider than you ever see on State Street now.
Sure.
I mean, it was crowded to the max of people going up to Sherlock's from my place or coming from Sherlock's down. They've had enough drafts. They want to come down and get a mixed drink or vice versa. It was really a good thing. Scully's loved it because suddenly there was another place that drew the Sherlock's crowd down to me, and they weren't such a long haul for people to get to.
Yeah.
So they loved me being there, too.
Well, this is a music podcast, and you're on because you brought so much great music, I mean, one of the earliest bands I could find playing there was Joe Scatella's Garage Band. Joe
Scatella was not in the Garage Band.
He was in a garage band because I know John Hyatt played in a garage band, but Jabberwocky eventually became
Jabberwocky was great. But the very first band that ever played for me, and these guys, was called the Garage Band.
Okay.
And it was Marty O'Connor, and it was Dave Blates, and it was Rick Scantlebury and Matt Ferguson on drums. They were the first band that ever played.
Yeah, and they were all left over from Jabberwocky. Right.
So they
not all of them, but
started playing for me. And Dave Blates is still, one of the premier bass players in town, still out there playing all the time.
Told him lots of times he's one of my favorites.
Oh, and gosh, I tell you.
He doesn't think that he has enough history in Erie to be on this podcast, and I disagree with him. I love him so much.
God. He doesn't want to come on. No.
I love him so much.
I'll have to send him a message.
Yeah. We just talked a little while ago. So who were some of those early bands that you remember? Because you are responsible for a lot of bands, not only, I guess, kind of getting discovered locally, because you would give people a chance.
Yeah.
And Do you have some that you really are proud of that, hey, they started playing at Docksider when they were early.
Zipper City Blues Band became the house band.
Sure.
The backbone of the bar was always blues.
Yeah.
We moved off in the reggae. I think I was the first one to bring reggae into town.
I'm sure.
And, a little funk, Grateful Dead jam music, but
Absolutely.
blues was always the backbone. And I remember when the garage band was going to break up, Marty O'Connor, tells me, he says, you might want to go check out this band that's playing at the Greens in Edinburgh. And I go, and it's Zipper City Blues Band, and we had a conversation, and they played for me probably 2 times. I mean, I never have bands play for me 2 times a month. But,
okay, yeah.
But at first, they played for me twice a month for probably the first 5 or 6 years of them playing.
And they're from Meadville.
They're from Meadville,
and
right.
So,
right, where the name Zipper City comes from.
Exactly.
Because of Talon Zippers.
So that is your introduction to Roger Montgomery.
Right.
Dave. And who else is in the band back then?
It was Roger, it was Dave, it was Dennis Whelan on harmonica,
yeah.
and it was Brian Whitney on drums.
Okay.
Boy, I'm glad I remembered that.
Man, I saw them plenty of times over the years.
Oh, they were great. They were great. And then from there, John Hyatt was probably the second longest playing guy that I had. And John then was basically acoustic. I did acoustics on Thursday, and then loud amplified music on Friday and or Saturday was what I did. But it was them, and it was Rick and Brian Butler played for me.
Yeah.
I just ran across some of these names. I mean, the Clarks played for me, but that was maybe a little bit more on. But I never really had planned to do the amount of music that I ended up doing. But
what was that amount? How often were bands playing there?
Well, at first it just started. Well, at first it might have been 2 times a week.
Okay.
It was a Thursday and it was a Saturday.
Okay.
I wanted to keep the Fridays open because I always wanted to keep the bar atmosphere alive.
Oh.
And not just have it be a music place.
Right.
Because suddenly if you don't have music, then nobody shows up and nobody's there. So I wanted to keep both.
Yeah,
I was looking to have the best of both worlds. Is what I was looking to do. But, as soon as a band does well, and as soon as you pay them what you say you're going to pay them, and there's no flim-flamming at the end of the night, and if it's a good night, you pay them more, they're on the phone with you the next day wanting to gig in a couple of weeks. And then word gets out to a lot of other bands, and my phone was ringing off the hook.
Well, that's what I was going to say is, we're talking about the early to mid-'80s.
Right.
There's no internet,
Exactly.
no cell phones.
Word of mouth is literally word of mouth.
Yeah, you told me before here when you went over to the Euclid Tavern and you'd see bands there, and that's how you would find them sometimes.
Right.
You ended up bringing regional and national acts to town.
Right, for sure.
That was all done on the phone?
On the phone. On a pay phone, mind you. I never had an office at 420
Okay.
Every band that ever booked was booked, if you remember the layout of that place, right by the front door there was a pay phone.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we had a tall table. I'd get my books out and I'd be on the pay phone that had a cord about that long so I couldn't get too far from it.
Yeah.
And I'm writing down things in the book and I'm making dates. It was so seat of the pants that it's like,
That's funny.
It's hard for me to believe that it actually came across. And we had an answering phone behind the bar that answered when the payphone rang.
Oh.
And we found out, so it didn't cost us a quarter every time we wanted to make a call, is from the payphone, if you hit the clicker down, like if it's a 454 number, 1, 2, 3, 4, you hit it, then you pause, then you hit it down 5 times, then you hit it down 4 times, and you do that through the number, it'll ring.
Wow.
So we got the call.
That's crazy.
I know.
Wow.
I don't know how we ever determined that you could do that.
Yeah.
But we did nonetheless. So.
Well, like I said, lots of local bands, obviously regional, but some of the local bands that play. You mentioned Zipper City, Roger Montgomery, John Hyatt. I used to go see Blind Dog there. They eventually evolved into
became Plato's Cave. Yeah.
Big Dave and the Ultrasonics obviously is a offshoot of Zipper City. We mentioned the Dogs.
Big Dave probably, one of my favorite bands. I don't know who I might have liked. Well, you think about Terrence Simeon and Walter. I think of bands, and you hate to say this one was my favorite, but
I wasn't going to ask you.
Boy, they got to be top 3.
Really?
They really have to be top 3. It was always such a good time when they were
the Dogs, Jake's Blues.
Blues.
Jake had to be young.
Oh, he was a pup then. Yeah.
Dollhouse Caper.
Oh God. Stevens.
Yeah,
yeah. Who's he's got a band with his kids now.
Yeah.
The Bandits, I think they're called, right?
But there are a lot of bands that, either like the Dogs lasted a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And some of these bands also were original bands. I'll call the Dogs an original band,
Right.
even though they played some crazy covers and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, were there time? I mean, you obviously lean into blues and eventually reggae and everything like that.
Right.
But was there a genre that you said, no, I'm not really a fit for heavy metal or hard rock?
At first, but later on, I always tried to stretch the scene, at least at my bar, as much as it would stretch.
Right.
I would see bands, and poor Rick DeBello, I always tried to get him to work at 420 State, because I would see him at Norb's or see him someplace else.
Right.
And I liked it. I thought, oh man, I'm going to book him. And he'd always say, you sure? You sure you want me in your place? And I go, oh yeah, I liked it. But it never worked in my place with him, not just with him, but with others, and it just didn't work.
Yeah, I wondered,
because I tried to stretch it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want anybody to not have a reason to not want to come to my bar.
Sure.
So I really tried to stretch everything. But my niche became blues, reggae, jam bands.
Yeah, jam bands.
It became. There was a time it was the Dead bar in Erie.
For sure.
So,
are you a big Deadhead?
Yeah, I was. My wife was actually a bigger Deadhead. Had been to many shows. I actually saw the Dead in 1971.
Oh, wow.
At Allegheny College when Pigpen was still alive.
Wow.
So I saw them there with New Riders of the Purple Sage opened up for them.
Yeah.
And Jerry was playing pedal steel for that show. And to bring it around a full 360, David Nelson, who was the founder of New Riders of the Purple Sage, played in my bar a couple different times.
Wow.
In a couple different configurations.
How did you get guys like that?
They all called me.
They did?
They all called me.
Because that's what I wondered. You had Brian Auger, for God's sake. You had
Auger.
Rusted Root, of course, God Street Wine, Dawn of the Buffalo. You mentioned Terrence Simeon.
Mo,
Brownie Mary. Some of those are regional acts. I get it. But some of those bigger, like Derek Trucks.
Right.
How did that happen?
Well, I worked with some agents that had worked with me in the past.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't me that worked with the agent. The bands that I booked worked with agents.
Okay.
So I had worked with certain people, and they always knew that, what I said is what was delivered.
Yeah.
So the bands always got paid. It wasn't rocket science. You pay a band, like I said, you pay them what you tell them you're going to pay them, and they love you.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of places that don't do that, I guess. So they would call me. And, I really didn't have to pick up the call, unless something happened and I had to fill a date, then I start calling.
So they're calling that payphone in the...
Yeah, no fool. They're all calling the payphone,
That is crazy.
Yeah. So Trucks played for me up at 1015 State, not at 420.
Oh, okay. All right.
So when he was young, he played at Sherlock's.
Oh.
When he was like the young 14 or 15-year-old phenom. Then.
Yeah.
This was like pre-Derek Trucks band.
Yeah,
this was the young phenom.
Yep, right.
So he played for me at 1015 State.
Okay.
And that worked that same way. They had the agent, and they called, and we made the deal, and the show happened.
Well, tell us about that show, though.
Well, that was
big thing about that
was
show.
Such a great show. And at the time, he was going on. He started dating Susan Tedeschi.
Right.
And they weren't married. They weren't really, but they were dating. And they had been separated for a while because she was out touring and he was touring.
Did you know who she was?
I know. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So she shows up at the show, and she shows up as he's playing. I see her walking in, and she comes to the end of the bar, and we're talking, and the place is slammed. And she says to me, Jesus, is there anything I can do to help you? This is one of my favorite stories of the Docksider. And I think I had a plate of tacos in my hand that somebody in the balcony up at the front had ordered.
Right.
And she wants to know if she can help, and she's willing to help. And I said, yeah, if you don't mind, you could run this plate of tacos up to that table at the end. And sure enough, she just runs it right up and does it.
So someone had got their tacos delivered from Susan Tedeschi.
It was great. And it was that kind of a place where that sort of stuff could happen. Because it was... we were all so unaffected about anything that we did. It was all just, trying to keep the scene going, trying to keep the people in. Let's just keep this thing going and don't worry about this or worry about that. I mean, I probably worried about money the least of any bar owner I've ever known. Not that I'm saying that's the way to do it, because probably isn't the way to do it. But, to me, the most important thing was keeping the music going.
All right, so let's talk about paying bands. And so how did it work back then? Was it a flat fee? Was it the door? Was it a portion of both? Was it a combination? I don't remember.
The deals varied
They did.
by depending on the band. Generally speaking, it was a flat fee.
Okay.
And I would get a cover charge, and I would, it would always be, I'd pay the guarantee.
Right.
I would take the next 100 to pay for the sound guy and that sort of stuff, and I would give them 100% after that.
Okay. All right.
So it was either that way or it was just maybe a straight door deal. I never did a percentage of the bar deal because I never
hard to keep track.
wanted to tell everybody, what I sold.
Right,
you know what I mean? In terms of numbers, that was...
Were there nights where you didn't make anything because you had to pay the band?
Well, there were nights. I remember the first night God Street Wine played.
Yeah.
They had to talk me into the show. It was the first night. They were out of that New York City, what was that, the Rainforest Band or the Rainforest Bar? I can't remember the name of the bar there. It wasn't CBGB's, but they came out of that in New York City.
Like the Better End, maybe, or something like that?
No, it was, I don't know.
A big bar up there. Yeah.
So they want to come in on March 18th, which is the day after St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
And I'm going, worst day of the year, especially in this time.
Oh.
I mean, because everybody's shot.
Partied on
everybody's done.
Yeah,
I mean, there isn't anybody that's going to be out. I was a fairly soft touch. Well, sometimes maybe not, but they just wore me down. And I said, okay. I think they came in for a guarantee of $250.
And did you know them? Had you heard them?
Well, Ryan Down had heard of them, and he was like singing their praises.
Who was Ryan?
Ryan worked for me.
Gotcha. Okay.
Music guy. Helped me with bands and the scene bands that I might not have known about.
Cool. Okay.
So he's all hyped about them. And they had sent me stuff that I listened to,
Okay.
I mean, this was like pre-internet. So this is...
They mailed you a cassette.
They actually mailed me a cassette and a press kit, you know?
Right.
So I let them play. I think it was a $2 cover. I had 17 paid through the door that first night. So it was a bath. You know? I made less than $40 at the door.
Right.
I paid them what I owed them.
Yep.
The next time they came, word of mouth, it was packed. The place was packed. So you didn't always hit it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, boy, if I really liked the band, I'd bring them back a second time. Sometimes even a third time. I'd really try to...
Like the out-of-towner bands.
Yeah, right. Just because they're all so young and they're all so energetic, and I would see their faces if we're talking in person, and I'm saying, the numbers just aren't there, and blah blah blah, and I can see them just deflate in front of me, and I would always relent and say, okay, we'll try one more time or something like that. So it was always like that, but the deals varied as much as the bands that I had.
What was the highest you ever paid anybody? You don't have to say who it is. Probably an out-of-town, regional, national act. I mean, Brian Auger couldn't have been cheap.
No, Brian Auger wasn't cheap. What a great show that was. Oh, my gosh. Talk about a historical show.
Played with his kids, right?
Oh, yeah. His daughter was, his daughter was there singing. I'll tell you another great show that was really good that I didn't, I had my doubts about how good it was going to be. The guy that sang, you're going to drive me to drinking if you don't stop running that hot rod link, Commander Cody.
Yeah,
Commander Cody came and played at 1015 State. Phenomenal show.
Really?
Phenomenal show. Boy, another one I didn't know about, but it was the Zappa connection. Ike Willis that played in the Frank Zappa's band.
Played in the Mothers originally.
Right. I mean, he comes with a band that's backing him up called Project Object.
Oh.
The place was packed to the max for that night too. That was a shock to me. I didn't.
And was that they reached out to you?
Yeah.
Again?
Oh yeah.
In those early '80s, I mean, when we're still down lower state,
right?
I mean,
at 420 State, by the way, is the address.
Perfect number.
And I've got to throw in that we did our best to live up to the number.
Sure. Yeah. those bands that played there, what was one that you were surprised at, back then, like a local band, you're thinking, all right, I'll give these guys a shot. I mean, like the Walker Boys eventually brought people, obviously. Blind Dog did well and everything. But at first,
first, I'll tell you, at first they gave me, it was a cassette of their music.
Yeah.
And it wasn't very, it wasn't a good recording. And it was just, I listened to it and I just didn't get it at first. It was, it was Blind Dog, or, it was Plato's Cave eventually became, probably in that top 3 or 5 bands that were favorite bands of mine. They moved into that. But at first, I didn't really know who they were so much, or...
Yeah, 2 brothers. Yeah. 2 sets of brothers.
Well, 2 sets of brothers, and they all... Yeah. And then, like once I got to know them and they played for me, they were so... they actually had like movements in their show where different things would happen, and they would raise the tempo up, and it would raise up, and then they'd bring it right back down again, and the interplay between them, it was phenomenal.
Right.
And Gary Bauman, or Randy Bauman, you got players, I've said this before, in fact, I think Heather Moss at Aldrich State used this line too with somebody else. You got players and you got entertainers.
Sure.
And sometimes you got both, in the same package. Bauman is that. Yeah. Bauman could come in with a piano and a guitar and himself hold a room of 400 people in the palm of his hand. He's that kind of an entertainment guy.
And let's keep in mind that when he came, he was the youngest person in that band. He was at prep, I think. He was like 18, 17.
He was 17 or 18. He used to tell me about it. I used to tell him laughingly, I would say, listen, if the LCB comes in, I'm going to throw you a bar rag. Yeah. You just start wiping shit down.
Right,
Oops, sorry, excuse me.
No, you can say whatever you want. It's all right.
You just start wiping stuff down. You're suddenly on the payroll.
Right,
you know?
And for those folks who don't know, Randy Bauman has been on the radio in Pittsburgh for many years and everything.
Yep.
He's a great keyboard player, great guitar player. His brother was the lead guitar player, fantastic player. This band was full of real musicians and stuff early in their careers.
For sure.
Matty and Eric Walker and
they were very precise about what it was they wanted to do, and they did it. It wasn't just let's throw this together and see how it all lands. They had a plan and they carried it out. They were that good. There were sometimes I'd have Big Dave on a Saturday. I'd have Plato's Cave on a Friday. I'd have John Hyatt and Smiling Catfish on this day. And maybe I would have had Rod Piazza in on that Monday for some Monday blues. It was like,
And we should say, the place could hold about, 230, 200, 230?
What, 420 state?
Yeah, 420.
Not legally, no.
I was there plenty of times, man, when there had to be that much.
You don't want to joke about something, like fire safety. You really don't. But, Back in the 80s, you just didn't, you really didn't think about that sort of stuff. My thought was if you got your square foot, be happy, and it was, it was jamming. But I'm sure that the legal occupancy was under 100 people.
Yeah.
Legally.
Wow.
It was under 100.
Wow.
Because there just weren't that many, if I'd added another bathroom, it would have accounted for more. But because there was always a line to get into the ladies' room in that place.
For those people who don't remember or had never been there, we're talking a rectangular bar.
Small.
And it was just jam-packed. It was tight,
maybe 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
All
right, you mentioned fire. We have to talk about fire. So, first of all, the Dogs are playing... Before we get to the fire, because that's Roger, but the Dogs are playing one night.
When there's a leak.
And
you know about that.
And what happened? Tell us about that.
Well, there were people that lived upstairs.
Right.
And it was loud.
I can't imagine living above.
I paid some of them off.
Because you weren't renting to them. They were through the landlord, right?
They were through the landlord.
Yeah, so...
I was up there when there were bands playing. There wasn't any way, if you lived up there, you couldn't do anything.
I bet.
Other than hear the band.
Right.
That was the only thing. I mean, if you were talking to somebody as close as we are now, they wouldn't be able to hear you. It was as if you were standing in front of the band. That's how loud it was.
And there
up
were like 7 apartments up there, so they all had to be.
Yeah, and there were some that were really a problem with complaining. They would call the liquor control board, and finally, I just said to him, I said, "Hey, if I give you $50 a month to keep quiet, will you keep quiet?" And the guy says, "Yeah." So I paid him, and I paid somebody else. I paid them money monthly just so they weren't on the phone with the liquor control board every time I had a band, you know. So there's people living upstairs, and there were issues in that building, and there was a water leak.
Okay.
It was pouring down over this. Wait a minute. You know what? I can't remember if I had a stage then at that time. Because at first they used to play on the floor.
I was going to say, I don't remember. I think it was just on the floor.
Well, yeah, but
eventually later you built the.
Yeah, I got a stage, or I rented it, and then I ended up buying the stage.
Okay.
Which I ended up selling to the folks at Forward Hall.
Oh, no way.
When I moved. So water is starting to pour down through the ceiling, down where the band's playing, but it's the summertime, and I have these overhead fans, and they're on full blast. And the water is coming down through the fan. It whips them around. It's throwing water probably, it's a fairly good stream of water. It's not just like a little, I mean, it's pouring in pretty good. And it's throwing water 50 feet. Which, in that bar, 50 feet from that fan, you're almost to the front door. So the whole place is getting like soaked with the band. They always bring that up. Jack Bernard always brought that up about when the water came through, and it just soaked onto everybody.
What happened? Was something upstairs?
Well, it was just like something overflowed or a guy or a bat, I don't know what it was. There was always an issue with that place, which is why I eventually moved.
And that shut down that night, right? I mean, did you have to quit? Obviously, the band has water falling down onto them.
I ran upstairs, found out what the problem was. The show was going to go on.
All right,
the show was going to go on. There weren't going to be any refunds.
That's right, yeah. All right, so
we're going to make this work.
So we have water coming down, but in June of 95, there's more than water, there's fire.
God.
So what happens?
So I'm working the front door. I've got a national act, John Brim. He's a blues guy.
Yeah.
The Ice Cream Man, they called him. Roger's opening up for him. So I'm working the door, and there's a guy comes, and he comes in, he says, "Hey, you might want to come out and check this out. I think there's smoke coming up here." Because right next to my front door was the door to go upstairs to the apartments.
Yeah.
So I open it up, and I'm looking, and I see a little smoke, and I start walking up the stairs, and it gets, really smoky in the hallway, and I'm kind of looking, and it's hard to see, and it's like, finally it hit me. It's like, oh my God, there's a fire. There's a fire in here.
Yeah.
So I come downstairs. I go up to Roger, and he's playing. Roger, you got to make a small announcement that there's a small fire, and we all have to exit the building now.
Yeah, mellow.
And he looks at me, and he says, "You're kidding, right?" I go, "No, you got to do that." So he does that, and everybody's so everybody's leaving. It starts getting smoky in the bar. I mean, this is how fast this can happen. This really taught me a lesson with how fast, because it went from me going up to tell him that there's a fire, there's no smoke in the place, nobody knows anything about anything, to by the time the band got their equipment, because I remember Roger and the band is running with equipment and amps. They're running out, outside. The bar starts to get filled with smoke. I'm behind in my registers, getting all the cash out, sticking the cash in my pockets, because I don't know if it's going to burn up. If cash is going to burn up. How do you account for this? Blah blah blah. I just wanted to have it with me. Sure enough, the fire department came, and there was a fire that had started in the back hallway, and it went up a back hallway behind where the bar was. It went up like a chimney.
Yeah.
It just went up that stairwell and started, oh my God, they were on the roof. They were chopping holes in the roof. Shit. It was a real deal. They had water in there. But I remember a real surreal thing that I saw. I walked in the back door once it had kind of calmed down a little bit. I mean, it seemed as though the fire was out. It was smoky. Boy, I walk in the back, and the weird thing, my power came in from underground in that place.
Okay.
So So all my neons are still lit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're all still on. My inside, like globe lights that hung from the ceiling, are all still on. They are completely filled with water.
Oh,
the bulbs are underwater in the globe, still lit. The red from the fire trucks is going around outside, so that's flashing inside.
Yeah.
As I'm looking at this site where there's water coming in from 100 different spots of the ceiling from all the water that they poured on the fire.
Right.
And I'm back there looking at this and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do tomorrow?
Right.
You know, what am I going to do here?
How long were you closed?
3 weeks was all.
That's it?
3 weeks.
Holy cow.
We opened up with Plato's Cave, and their first song was Burning Down the House.
Nice.
Followed by Fire on the Mountain, followed by another one that was fire related.
So
but that was the thing. But I was down for 3 weeks. It didn't, guys in there that night saying, because I had a nice big tin ceiling in there.
Yeah.
They're saying, you're going to lose this ceiling, floor's going to pop up and buckle, you're going to lose your bar. They're soothsayers of doom. And I figured, I didn't know. I thought they were right. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Well, none of that stuff really happened. There was a hole in the roof that we had to get fixed, was the main thing from the firemen.
Okay, yeah.
That made the hole with the axes, to allow smoke and heat to escape, and they could put water in through there. So we actually, my friend that owned a construction company and my other friend that owned an equipment company, they came and they said what I would do is I would build a box over the hole, just a box with wood.
Yeah.
Just build a box, put a top on it, seal it real good with like roofing material.
Like Black Joe or something.
And get yourself open.
Yeah.
That way. And it mostly worked until like I still had to have barrels up there because there were still a couple places that dripped. But I only had to run up and fill the barrel and empty the barrels after like a hard rain.
Real bad.
And I just had to dump the barrels out. So it wasn't, that bad. But we got back open again because that was the thing. Because I had, that was what I did.
Right.
And
no
when I'm down, I got no income. So, so there was a real push to get the place open. And the cave opened up. Free show. They didn't charge me anything.
Oh, nice.
Free admission. We advertised it that way. And, again, like every cave show I ever had, it was wall-to-wall people.
Yep.
I definitely had over my 90.
So that's June of 95. Yeah. And you moved to 1015 State, the old Winter Inn, in June of 98, I think.
Right.
So, but a lot of people may think, oh, it was the fire that did it, but that wasn't it. Tell us about why.
Well, it was that I seemed to have found what I was going to do. I didn't see that I was going to be changing and finding a different career for myself. I was doing what I was going to do. Right. And I didn't own the building. I rented, and that was a problem.
Yeah.
And, the guy kind of knew, and, he said, half-heartedly, if you give me this much, you can have it. Well, this much was crazy much,
Yeah.
And I wanted a bigger place, and I just, wanted to find another place that I owned.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm walking up and down State Street, and there's, a lot of vacancies on State at the time.
Okay.
And we came up to what was the old Winter Inn, and, kind of looking in the windows and not really seeing much, but I searched it. It was vacant.
It was vacant?
Yeah. Well, it was vacant. A guy was using it as storage for antiques.
Okay, all right.
And I found out Rick Filippi owned the property.
Okay.
And this was before he was mayor, right?
So he owned Sullivan's probably at the time. And,
right.
Yeah,
and he owned that one too, and he probably owned other things at the time also. Yeah. So I called him. He showed it to us. They had water leaks that were in there at the time, so water is dripping.
You're like, not water again.
Yeah, And we went next door and looked at what at State Street Tavern was for sale.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait a minute. No, it wasn't State Street Tavern yet because I hadn't moved up. They weren't even in there yet.
Oh, right.
That place was vacant, too.
That was empty, yeah.
And I actually saw that place in my mind better than I saw, where it ended up.
Right.
Because, with all the things in there, like the antiques, the water leaking, it had that balcony, beautiful balcony
which
was
nice.
but it wasn't speaking to me.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about it, and again, my wife at the time thought, "Boy, I like this place better." So so I went through it a couple more times. Decided, okay, we're going to make this place the offer, and we made him an offer, and he took it, and it was,
It was a big move, I bet.
Well, it was a big move, and it was a fairly good price too.
Yeah.
Because again, there wasn't anything going on. You could see there was water leaks in there.
So you were buying it. No more leasing. No more renting.
Right.
And your capacity there was what then? Much more.
Yeah, it was. I think the capacity there was pushing, maybe 180, 190.
Okay.
I mean, you think more than that because I had more than that in there. But if they ever wanted to. If they wanted to enforce that sort of thing, they could hurt a lot of people that really count on that overage.
Sure.
But it might have been 200. Well, I guess it probably must have been 200 because I had that whole upstairs, that whole back
area was nice. Yeah.
Of the upstairs. But we brought the bar top from 420 State. We cut that off. My friend Artie.
Yep.
I'm saying, how are we going to get this bar top off? Suddenly, he's got like a saw, and he goes right underneath it, all the way down to the end with his saw, and we just lifted it up, and it came up. And we put it in the back of OJ's truck. We walked it from 420 State because it stuck way far out the back.
Yeah.
We had ropes hanging from the back up to the top of the truck. We had 6 guys in the back, 3 on each side, holding the back end of the bar out because my big problem was it was going to start to bend.
Yeah, right.
And it was going to start to bend and it was going to crack right in the middle. So we're going slow up State Street over to French. We're holding on to the back. We run it inside. It's sitting in the back room until 2 days before I'm supposed to open. The place is ready.
Yeah.
It's pretty much ready. But I'm standing behind what would have been behind the bar if the bar had been up yet.
Yeah, right.
And I'm looking around, and there's workers in there. Everybody's buzzing around, and I'm going, am I the only person that's bothered because there's no damn bar in here yet? And I was screaming my lungs out. Because I was worried. I was supposed to open in 2 days with, Terrence Simeon was going to be my opening, followed by Rod Piazza, or else it was vice versa. It was 2 heavy hitter, 420 favorite bands were going to open in 2 days, and I didn't have a bar there.
Yeah.
Yet. So the guy that was going to build it came in, and he was really good. And, he built it in front of the bar, laid the other one on top, did this, and we were up and ready to go. Yeah.
How long did it take from the time you left 420 to get to 1015?
About 3 months.
3 months.
3 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
we had to rip off like 4 layers of floor by hand with a push rod to get to the wood floor on the bottom.
Oh wow!
And then sand it down, and
then you had to build the stage.
Then we had to build the stage.
Right.
Yeah. And let's see, what did I do with that stage? Did I have the power for that stage? Yeah, I think.
And did you have a kitchen in that place or no?
Yeah, there was a kitchen, but there wasn't a lot going on in the kitchen.
Okay. Right.
I never really pushed the food that much then.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, there towards the end, I did a little bit more with food. Had a guy in there making tacos.
Okay. Yeah.
Like for me on a taco night.
Because
but
Susan Tedeschi had to deliver
yeah,
them.
she delivered tacos, and she was great about it too. I wonder if they remember that.
And for those of you who don't know, 1015 State, if you've been watching the news, was just closed.
Oh my gosh!
The old Super Chicken just got some bad stuff's been going on down there. So that gives you an idea where it is today. Right. But back then, the old Winter Inn, 1015 State, it's bigger. You got more space. What happens then? I mean, you have it for a couple years.
Well, I'm there for probably from like 98 to the end of 06. So the very beginning of 07, I think, is when it was. So I was there for about 8 years.
And why'd you get out?
Divorce.
Oh,
it was a divorce that got me out.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I was getting. I mean, my attitude at the time of the divorce was "Get me the hell out of here." Was my attitude.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I mean, if it wouldn't have been for, I still might even be there now, although I actually kind of doubt that fact. But it was that kind of got me out of it. And
you had a non-compete, didn't you? Like, were you allowed to open another bar? Because you didn't open Nelson's for a few years.
Oh, yeah, right. It was a non-compete for 2 years.
Okay, all right.
Right.
So then you opened Nelson's in 2009. I think.
Well, I think it was I think it was 2000. It was new. Well, you know what it was? It was an accountant's nightmare. It was the last day of the year of 2007 because I opened on New Year's Eve of 2007.
Oh, okay.
And then
right.
2008 started off, the 8th year.
Gotcha.
But of course, there was that one pesky day
One day,
2007. And my sister, the CPA that did my tax work, was like, you had to get one day worth of business in 2007, didn't you, Bob?
And Nelson's is what Room 33 is today.
Correct.
You showed me the blueprint that you just found. Not
right.
blueprint,
yeah.
a design that you found that you made back then.
Oh, yeah.
You keep that for few years, it becomes the Vermont Tavern, but that's not you, right?
No, that's not me. I get out of there in probably 2011.
Okay.
I think it was the end of 2011.
All right.
So I was there for like 3 years because it was the end of 2011, started the end of 2000 and it was 2008, 2009, 2010. Well, almost 4 years, I guess.
Okay. And that was a big difference. I mean, because that was food, and you really had a good
that was
chef
food, and that was all kinds of things. Boy, for a time there, we had a great chef.
Yeah,
and he's doing really well now. He's up in Alaska, but
was that something you always wanted to do at the older places to offer food? Because that was
that was a huge difference, and it was always like my philosophy was always, boy, that bottle of Jim Beam's going to last forever, but that head of lettuce is going to get tossed out in 3 days. So I never wanted to do as much with food. But I came from a food background from the Green Shingle Truck Stop,
right,
So it was. So that actually, is what made me think that for so many years is that, this food is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to use this stuff. And if you're not using it, you better find something to put these leftovers in so you make something else so you're not throwing it out because everything you throw in the garbage is dollars and cents. You know?
Right.
So you better make this. I mean, if you got some beef left over, you better make some beef hash or something.
Right.
So, but that was a whole different. Scene there. We had great. I mean, geez, the food was really good.
Yeah.
I mean, it was renowned there.
I was going to say it became known as a place to go to eat.
Right.
Whereas I was, Docksider was always a place to go to listen to music.
Right.
And so you eventually get out of it. Today you're 72.
I'm 72 years old.
Mean, you haven't been doing anything.
I haven't been doing any. Well,
bar-wise.
Right. I was doing a little bit of work for my friend. That owns some properties, but basically I'm retired.
You are? Okay.
It took me a long time to be able to say that to people out loud. I mean, my friend would always say, "Sure, you're retired." I go, "I'm not retired. I'm just not working
That's
now."
right. Yeah.
Because to say you're retired is a quantum leap
it is.
in stuff, and I wasn't quite prepared to say that. But the longer I find myself retired, the easier it is to say that. But I do want to find something to fill some time with because, I mean, I used to go out with this gal and I would tell her, idle hands is the devil's workshop. And
for sure.
That's a true statement.
I mean, this guy's sitting here wearing an original Docksider sweatshirt, so it's in your blood. I mean, we're not ruling you out for being involved somewhere.
No. I got out of it. Relatively unscathed because that business can be like harmful to your health.
I bet.
Mean, it's hazardous.
Right.
There probably isn't a night that went by that it's late night and you're working and you're sitting there and everybody's scurrying around, cleaning up and wiping up and restocking, and somebody comes up to you and whispers in your ear, "You want one?" And
sure.
One could have been any number of things, but it was always there, and it was always around you, and it was rock and roll. It was that scene, and it was, it's easy to get wrapped up in that and get hurt by it.
I always ask the musicians at the end about crazy stories, gigs, bad things that happen on the road, fun things that happen on the road. I mean, you've given me some good stories already today.
Right,
Are there other ones you're like, oh, but I didn't tell you this? One of my favorites was this.
Well, I think I said it to you when I was talking about Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah.
Who actually had played with Muddy Waters.
Right.
They came up that pipeline out of Mississippi, straight north. If you look at Mississippi, you go straight north, you hit Chicago.
Okay.
That's where the Chicago blues scene started.
Yeah.
All those people that were singing in the cotton fields down there all moved south, went to Chicago, and that became the blues scene. And Jimmy Rogers actually is the guy that turned Muddy Waters on to the electric guitar.
Oh, okay.
That you could put a pickup on your acoustic guitar and it would be electrified.
Yeah.
So years later, Muddy Waters is dead, and again, I get a call from an agent that I've worked with. He says, I've got Jimmy Rogers, coming through, and he wants to play here. Well, I know the name. It's like a heritage. I mean, it's solidly heritage kind of a guy.
Yeah.
So he comes and plays, and it was the first time I ever really focused on a rhythm guitar player.
Oh.
And he blew me away with his rhythms. I mean, he just knocked my socks off.
Right.
So after the show, we're in the back room, and we're talking, and we're going on, and his son's in the band. His son comes back after maybe 45 minutes of us talking. We're talking about anything and everything.
And this is at 420.
This is at 420. Yeah. We're talking about the blues scene in Chicago. We're talking about the music scene in Erie, which at the time I was telling him that I would put this music scene up against any music scene anywhere on the planet.
Yeah.
What was happening late 70s to the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was electric in this town. It really was.
Yeah.
Gives me chills just saying that.
Yeah, I love
it. Man, it was great. So we're back there talking about our dogs that we have. I got Labradors. He's got Labradors. We're just chatting. And I'm talking with a legend, and I'm going to talk as long as he's going to have me talk. Yeah. Son comes back a second time. Says, Pop, we got to go. He looked at him, snapped at him. He said, "This is my band, and I'll tell you when we're going."
And it's like 3 in the morning.
Oh, this is past 3.
Okay, all right.
This is because we got back there about 2:30.
Okay,
so this is past 3:30.
Yeah.
We've been talking. Finally, there's a knock on the door. His son didn't come back in.
Yeah,
they sent somebody else back in, and he, he looks at him sternly. He says, "Okay." So we broke up the conversation, but it is. It's a memory that I hold very dearly because it was one-on-one with an absolute legend. And that picture I showed you was him with Mick Jagger doing a duet on the mic. So this guy was a legend.
Yeah,
so,
you want to sit with those types of guys.
I want to stay as long as he'll want to listen to me, or as long as when I'm nodding my head when he's talking, he'll enjoy it.
Well, you're a legend in this town for sure. Let's do one thing before I let you go. Is the Docksider has a rabid fan base.
Oh, yes.
Unlike many bars, there are people that were more than just patrons. They became your friends, family.
Oh, yeah.
Artie Levin has a Facebook page dedicated to it.
Right. And it's the Slider at 420 State is what it's called.
Right. And so give a shout out to some of those folks who worked for you, who were friends with you over the years that helped make that scene. Because you've already mentioned some of them to me. Artie obviously is
Artie was a huge member, but it was the employees that worked there. It was always about the employees. I actually didn't mind sort of leaning against the wall, sinking into the woodwork and allowing them to carry the ball because they did it so well. I mean, John Wazalewski worked for me. Jane Chittister worked for me. Seamus Lewis, the Lewis brothers worked for me. Seamus, Mark Lewis, and Dan Lewis worked for me. The Downs worked for me. 3 members of the Down family.
Yeah.
Their families were always down. It was always with me. It was, I was there a lot because it was, if I wasn't there, I was thinking about the place.
Right.
It's pretty much, if it's your own place, it's 24/7 in your mind. And I always wanted to be surrounded by people that I would want to hang with anyway.
Yeah, right.
Even if I didn't own a bar, I'd want to hang with these people. And that was who I hired, and I was lucky enough to have that as my fan base. And I want to give a shout out to the people at Altered States, too, because they
told
hung.
me about Heather, but tell everybody else about it.
Well, they hung, and Heather and a group of beautiful young hippie gals would come down to 420 State, and they would come in and lighten the place up, and just with their presence and their hippiness and their love of music, and they were just the swinging and swaying.
They were young.
They were young. They would sometimes. sometimes if it was a very busy night and the word was out, the liquor control board was out, and I knew some of that group might have been close to 21, but not quite there.
Sure, yeah.
I would tell them, come back after 1 and we'll see.
Yeah, right.
Because I always figured, I don't know, I guess I'm pretty safe now to be saying this now.
Right.
But there wasn't any of the agents that were out past 1 o'clock. So then they would come in and they would party. But, I've been to Altered States, and I've called that place Docksider 2.0.
It was 100%.
Because it is such a similar vibe. Because they all hung there. Yeah. I mean, Gavin hung there, and Heather hung there, and Aaron hung there. But it was Heather that was the one that was there first and there with her friends, and just made us all happy and smile. So, so shout out to them at Altered States.
Well, you made all of us smile just by having all those bands over the years, and I appreciate it. I think every band member locally owes you a debt of gratitude. And
you showed me, because I showed you that I showed you that sign about.
Yeah, tell folks about this, because this was a special gig that was right after 9/11.
It was after 9/11. It was the Friday after 9/11. And, of course, 9/11 happened, and we're all glued to the TV. My sister Carrie is in, the building at the time. She got out fine. She got out safely. Bob Toth, who worked for me, was in the building at the time.
And tell folks about what Bob did then.
Oh, God. So Bob, Bob
was the sound man, right?
Yeah, Bob was a sound man and a good friend, and he's in the second one to get hit. So he's up on, I think, the 80th floor, and he's looking out his window, and he can see down where the plane's in the other building. There are announcements going on in the building that we're safe, you don't have to leave, everybody stay. He says, no, I'm getting out of here. So he goes down. As soon as he gets out, a plane hits below the 80th floor that he is on. And I think everybody that was above the 80th floor died in that. Right. And he was one of the few that decided that he wasn't going to listen to the announcements, and he left. He got in his car, left New York City, drove straight to Erie, Pennsylvania, pulled up in front of Docksider at 1:30. It was a Tuesday night because it was Trips night.
Right.
Comes in, orders a trip, pounds it, and starts relaying the story of that.
How about that?
So that was something. But we had to get this show ready because the Times needed to have copy by Wednesday.
Right.
And this was, not till Tuesday night I start thinking about this. Oh, boy, we should really do something for this show. We should do a benefit for the Red Cross, raise money and make a donation. Yeah. So I start calling bands that I knew. I'm calling everybody on the phone. I'm calling the Times. I don't have it for you yet. This is Wednesday morning. Well, you got to have it by noon. Okay, I will. Call them at noon. I don't have it ready yet. You got to hold off. You got to have it by 2 o'clock. I didn't have it by 2. They said, we'll give you an hour. So I finally got it lined up. I called in the Times copy at 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. It's in the paper the next Thursday in the showcase for the Friday benefit that just slammed. We had the flag, if anybody remembers the Burger King and the American flags that they flew, they were the biggest flags I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And we borrowed one of them from, his name was Patterson that owned them. And we hung that in front of the building. So it covered the entire front face of the building from the 3rd floor down to the top of the awning, for Docksider.
Yeah.
And that was, that could have been our best moment there at the bar with what we did then for that night.
Who played?
And it,
we can look.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking right now. It started off with Jake's Blues. At 5 p.m. it started. Then John Hyatt Band, then Roger Montgomery Blues Band, then One World Tribe, then East Avenue, which you told me you played in that gig.
I played in the band,
Yeah, you played in the band then, and then Starfish played at the end.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't Chocolate Starfish, it was just Starfish,
yeah.
Which means that Preach wasn't in it.
Wasn't in it, yeah.
And so that's what it
crazy.
was. So that's why it took... it took a lot of calling to get this lined up, and then just get everybody lined up, for gigging in 3 days.
Yeah,
and we do this,
Yeah.
So it was
Very cool.
that was something else.
Good highlight.
That was a good thump. That was a heart thumper.
For sure.
That was,
yeah.
that was good.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for all those great
thank you.
years. This
Thank
was
you.
great. I hope we covered everything.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was fun. I was nervous about this. I've never done, I haven't talked on the radio since I used to drive out to Northeast, and Rocket 101
in the old...
with Mojo and Natalie would
Yeah.
have you talking on the morning show.
Yeah, I did that plenty of times.
Yeah, we would do that. And of course, the only way we could get up to make it to that early hour was, of course, we all decided we're going to stay up.
Yeah, right.
So we stay up and we drive out there, and I don't know if they called us back a few times, so I guess we didn't blow it that bad.
Yeah. And I should point out, too, you brought a giant folder full of a lot of the press photos that bands would give you. We were going through that. You have all of your old calendar books that shows everything. So I'll take a few pictures and include it on your...
Cool.
So.
Thanks. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Hey, thanks for listening to Season 6 of the Erie Music History Podcast. Just a reminder that I do host a music night on the first Tuesday of the month at the JPT Foundation's Events Center. It's on West 38th Street in the plaza that's next to Our Lady of Peace Church. Starts from 6 o'clock, goes till 9 o'clock, totally free. BYO everything. You can bring in alcohol, food. There's a great pizza shop next door. There's a Subway in the plaza. We, of course, have our house band, the Fabulous Leftovers. They play for an hour, and then usually we open it up to an open mic, or we have some other prearranged acts that follow the Leftovers from probably around 7:15, 7:20 till 9 o'clock. So check that out, first Tuesday of the month. Thank you to the JPT Foundation for continually supporting this podcast. I appreciate it. Also, thanks to my buddy Angelo Phillips, who also threw us a few bucks for helping support the podcast. I appreciate that. You can go to Patreon if you'd like to contribute, or there's a Venmo also. You can find all of the episodes right now on any of the platforms that you listen to podcasts on. I have not been updating the actual website for the podcast. But you can also see the photos of the people that I interview for each episode on Facebook under Erie Music History Podcast. All right. Thanks a lot.